we're going to be looking at wood stabilization and how to do that at home in your shop. Basically what we're talking about is taking woods that otherwise you wouldn't be able to turn, that are starting to decay like this piece has, or perhaps like this one that is a very soft wood to begin with, and it has also started to spalt and is pretty soft. And by stabilizing this wood, we will actually make it stronger than it was originally, and it will turn very, very cleanly with almost no tear out. It also helps a great deal with controlling tear out of grain, because the resin that we stabilize it with really makes those cells strong. The resin that we use for this is a product that is actually water soluble. So when we clean up at the end, we can clean up with just water. And because of that, it is non-toxic, which is wonderful, and very low odor. Some resins can be pretty strong in the odor. This does not have any. This is a two-part, so that we have to add a catalyst. The catalyst comes in these squeeze tubes, and if you don't use this right away, it can settle out. And so the idea is that you squeeze this and make sure that it's well mixed, and then this is added to the resin. It's one of these to every quart. If you have a gallon size, obviously we'd put 4 of these in. Once the catalyst has been added to the resin, if stored properly, it can still be good for up to a year with no worry about it going bad on you. So it gives it a pretty long shelf life and good use. Now, along with this, we have a container that we're going to use, and this container is where we'll place the wood and then put the resin in to stabilize it. So we'll be looking at that, and then the last thing that we have to have is a vacuum source. We're going to be using a vacuum generator, so I will put compressed air in, and from that we'll get vacuum. If you have a vacuum pump or some other source, then you wouldn't need the generator. All right, so let's begin this process. We're going to place the wood that we want to stabilize in the container, and they stand vertically. So we'll put those in. I'm going to put a larger piece in as well, because you can do pieces larger for like bottle stoppers and that sort of thing with no problem at all. The resin will pull into a piece of that size. Now once we have these pieces standing in here, we're going to put a plate in on top of them, and this is called an anti-float plate, because when we pour the resin in, the wood would all float to the top, and we want this to actually go in there and hold that wood in place. So we slip it in there, and there's a cam on it, so I just take a screwdriver in that slot on the cam and expand it out, and that holds the plate in place inside the can, so that now it will not move up and down and the wood can't float out. So once you've got that all set, then you can begin with your resin and pour it in and bring it up so that it covers those pieces. All right, we have the wood in, we have the float plate on, and everything's locked in place so it can't float up and move around. We're ready to begin to put the resin in. I'm going to put some safety glasses on. You don't want this splashing on you. And you just want to pour this in slowly so it doesn't splash all over. And we have to fill this up until the wood is completely covered, and then above it a bit, because the resin is going to get pulled into the wood. And if you don't have enough to cover the wood, it may actually pull it down below the surface of the wood, and we don't want that to happen. So we just fill this up. Now, one thing, it may look like I'm pouring an awful lot of resin in, but that's okay, because the resin that doesn't get soaked into the wood will save at the end and put it right back in the container. It doesn't hurt it in any way. It can be reused. It's absolutely not a problem at all. Okay, we have the resin in there. So now we're ready to begin to apply vacuum to this. So we put the lid on. On this tank, we have a seal all the way around the top that seals the lid to the tank. Put our vacuum hose on. Now, if I put full vacuum to this, it's going to pull so much air so rapidly that it will make the resin foam. And we don't want that to happen, because if it foams too much, it'll actually lead to it pulling it into the vacuum generator. Or if you were using a vacuum pump, it could pull it into it. And you don't want that to happen. It would really muck things up inside there. So we want to pull it slowly. So what I've done on ours, we can adjust the air out, which I've done. So now I'm going to turn it on, but it's going to pull very little vacuum. But you'll begin to see that foam comes right up to the top of the resin. And we just control that. So we only pull about 5 inches to begin with. And when the foam subsides a bit, then I can increase the vacuum some more. So I'll just start to increase it now. And it will begin to, now it's bubbling pretty good again and foaming. And again, when that slows down, and it doesn't take too long usually, then we'll bring it back up. Now there are several variables here while we wait for this to go down that you have to take into account. How porous the wood is, how much decay there is in the wood even can affect this. The species of the wood, how hard it is in nature, will actually have an effect on how fast it pulls the resin in and how much air we have and how much foam it creates. So all of them are going to be different. And we didn't fill the pot with wood this time. If you fill it completely, there's a lot more air in there. So it's going to take a little longer for it to pull that down. Okay, now we've been pulling a vacuum on this for a while. And when you reach full vacuum at whatever your generator will make, ours will pull about 25 inches of mercury. When we get to that point, actually what we can do so that you don't have to have it continue to run, we can literally close this valve. Now, that still has vacuum, and I can turn the generator off. So it's holding vacuum. But every few minutes, I need to turn this back on because the air that's escaping from the wood is having the vacuum fall off. There's no harm in letting it just run continually if you choose to, but if you don't want your compressor to have to run a lot, you can actually just run this every few minutes and pull it back to your full vacuum, let it go down. The more air you pull from it, the slower the vacuum will go down. So, you know, when you get near the end of this process, it will hold for quite a long time. Now, how do you know when it's done? Well, once you've held full vacuum on it, and I'll turn the vacuum back on and open our valve back up, when I see that the air bubbles have all but completely subsided, there's just no more air coming up, maybe a bubble once every few seconds, that tells me that now we're done. We've pulled all the air out, the air has pulled the resin into the wood, and that wood is now complete. Generally, that is anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes, but again, there are an awful lot of variables depending on how soft the wood is and how much wood you put in the container will determine how long you have to go. Again, the best thing, rather than time, is to look at the bubbles and let them tell you when it's done. Okay, we've got these pieces done now. There's no more air coming from them, no more bubbles. So now we're ready to pour off the excess resin. So what I'm going to do is disconnect my hose, take the lid off, and then with the float plate still in place, because it'll hold the wood down, I'm going to remove this seal. And the idea of removing it is so that the resin doesn't get on it. Now again, it's water soluble and it'll clean up, but getting it all out of that groove and everything's kind of a pain. So we can just take it off. I'll take my container and I just have a funnel. And we put the funnel in here, and now what I'm going to do is just slowly pour the resin off into the container so that we save all that we didn't pull into the wood. All right, we have all of the resin now poured out into our container. And again, that resin can be used over and over until it's gone. It does not affect it at all, this process. And now, all the utensils, this funnel, all the other things, when we're all done here, again, just some warm soap and water, washes right up, no problem at all. And this is safe for this to go down the drain. It doesn't hurt a thing. So now our next step, I'm going to put on some gloves because I'm going to handle these parts, and it's just to keep the resin. It won't hurt my hands, but I just don't want to get all slimy. So we're going to put on some gloves here, and I will loosen the float plate and remove it first. So it's loose, and it'll come out, and we'll take it in a moment and clean it up. And now I have the wood. And when the wood comes out, it's going to have some resin on it. If it's dripping around too much, you can wipe the excess off. That's all you need to do. And so these pieces are going to be ready for us to put into the foil, which is the next thing. So what we have to do is roll out some foil here, and just aluminum foil is all we need. We'll pull out a piece, and what we're going to do is literally take these pieces and just wrap them in the foil. So I'm going to take the first one, start here, and wrap the foil around it. Now, I'm doing this for two reasons. One is that if I didn't do it, if these pieces were touching when we cure the resin, they would stick to each other and we wouldn't be able to separate them easily. So it does that. And the other thing is that the resin, to cure this resin, we have to raise the temperature to about, well, not about, exactly 195 to 200 degrees. So it is about, it's that range of just 5 degrees. But if you go too much above that or below that, it will not cure properly. So we're going to use a small oven to place these in. You can use your household oven. You better make sure you have permission from the cook in the house before you use their oven for that. A small toaster oven works beautifully for this, and it's what we recommend. So I'm going to wrap these pieces, and we'll be ready to put them in the oven. Now, once I've got them wrapped, I'm going to fold the ends up. I did say that there were two reasons for the foil. Some of the resin will leach or bleed back out of these pieces as it cures. It's not a lot, but if you don't have the foil, it would run all over the inside of the oven. So what we're doing is folding this up and putting the seam on top so that any resin that runs out is trapped inside the foil, and that way it won't run all over the inside of the oven. Now the good news is, even if it gets on the inside of the oven, once it's cured, it just peels right off. It will flake right off the metal and come right out of there. So you can clean it up if it happens to run out somewhere. Okay, we have our pieces wrapped. We have the oven preheated to 200 degrees. So now what I'm going to do is just open the oven and place these in. And we can just set them in there, close it up. Now, the time that this takes, it varies a great deal because there are so many variables. This is a little bit like fixing your turkey on Thanksgiving Day. The larger the turkey, the longer it has to stay in the oven for the heat to get all the way through. So the same thing happens here. If you just put a few pieces in, it's going to happen more quickly. If you put a lot in there and almost fill the oven, it's going to take longer. Here's the thing. It should take anywhere at least 45 minutes, and it can take all the way up to even 2 hours if you have a lot of wood. But what you can do is simply unwrap the foil just a little bit after about 50 minutes or so and check. And the resin on the outside will be solidified. You'll know that it has cured. If it's not and it's still wet, then just wrap it right back up, keep it in there. You want to do this quickly so the temperature doesn't drop. And then, again, wait about 15 to 20 minutes and check it again. And once it has solidified and you see that, it's all crystallized, that means that the batch is done and you can turn the oven off, take the pieces out, let them cool, and then you'll be ready to begin turning your pieces. All right, I believe we have some finished pieces here now. You can clearly see that there is resin and it has solidified, crystallized onto the surface. So we can unwrap these now, and they are ready for you to begin your projects. And this is wood that otherwise would not have been turnable. It just was so far gone as far as decay that it was too soft to turn. There it is, and you can see that I talked about some of the resin might peel off. That's what would be inside your oven if you didn't have these wrapped in the foil, and obviously they would have stuck together as well. So the foil is a very important step in this process. But now we do have some beautiful wood here that, again, otherwise I would not be able to use at all. Okay, if we have an object that's too large to fit into our container, we have a couple of choices. We get a bigger container or another system. Now here's the problem with getting a larger container to put things in. When we pull vacuum, it creates a great deal of pressure from atmospheric pressure. The larger the surface area of the container, the more pressure there is. And if the container gets much larger than the one that we have, then those pressures become so great that the wall thickness has to become much thicker. It would be a big, heavy container. And so what we've come up with, instead of using a container like this, we can do large objects like bowls by simply using a bag. Now, bags have been used for vacuum veneering for years, but what we're going to be able to do is place a bowl inside the bag, put the resin inside there, and then pull a vacuum on it, and we can actually stabilize bowl blanks in these bags. We have two different sizes. The small one will do up to about a 14-inch, and the large one will do up to an 18-inch bowl. And that's a pretty large piece, so we can accommodate almost anything that you would want to stabilize in these. Okay, we're going to take a closer look at the bags and how they're made and how they work and what we have here. What these are, they're very heavy Ziploc bags with a hose barb attached so that we can apply vacuum to the bag. Inside is a screen mesh, and that mesh is required because otherwise, if we put vacuum on this, it would just pull the two sides of the bag together and the vacuum wouldn't spread out through the entire bag. So the screen mesh is very important for transferring vacuum throughout the piece. So what we would do here is determine the size that you need. The smaller the bag, it's just easier to deal with. And so I'm going to use a small bag for this bowl that I have, and I'm going to pull this apart so that the bowl will be placed in the bag between the two layers of the mesh. Once I've got it in there, now I'm ready to seal this and begin the other parts of this process. Okay, we're going to take a look at the apparatus we need now to make the vacuum in this bag. If we pull vacuum directly on the bag, we're putting a resin in here, it would be pulled through and into our vacuum generator, some of the excess that's not pulled into the bowl. So what we have is a trap. Basically, this piece, we're going to have this hose coming from the bag into here so that any resin that gets pulled in goes through this tube to the bottom of the container. That keeps it from coming into this lead, which comes to the vacuum generator. So what we've done is trapped any of that resin that might get pulled through in this container. Again, any of that resin that's left and pulled in here can be saved and used on another piece at another time. So this serves two purposes. It traps that for us so that we can save it, and it keeps any of it from getting pulled through into our generator as we pull the vacuum on this. So our next step is to get this set, get some resin put into the bowl, and then we'll hook this up and begin to pull a vacuum on the bowl. Okay, we're ready now to begin to pour the resin into this bowl. But there's one other thing we need to deal with. If I just pour resin in there, the bottom of this bowl isn't real flat because it's just a rough turn bowl, and it could tip. And if it tips, then the resin could run out the front. I haven't sealed the bowl yet, and we'd have just a horrible mess. So there's a real simple solution to that. If you have a large bowl, you can use it, or even better, just a simple wooden frame like this that you can make in multiple sizes depending on the size of the bowl that you would be doing. And you simply take this, and I'm covering it with an old t-shirt just so the sharp edges won't puncture my bag. And then I'm just going to set the whole bowl and everything right into this frame and just push the bowl down in there. Now what that's done is just cradled the bowl, and so now if the resin runs out around it or spills at all, it just runs into the bag that's under it, and we don't have it running out the front and losing it out there at all. So I'm going to begin now and pour the resin in. And one of the questions that comes up is, how much resin do I put into this thing? Well, here's the thing. There's a formula. It has to do with the diameters of spheres, and you take the outside and the inside diameter and all that. When you buy this kit, we will have that formula in there, and all you'll have to do is plug the numbers in, and it will tell you the amount of volume that you need to add so that you're sure you have enough resin to fully impregnate the bowl with resin. So I'm going to pour the resin in now. Okay, that's plenty for this bowl. And again, if we put too much in, it's really not a big deal. We have the trap in place. It would capture any excess and be fine. Now, here's the next thing. I'm going to push the bag just down into here a bit and try to get things set up. And I've got to make sure that this screen mesh stays under where the port is for the vacuum so that it can distribute vacuum throughout this. Again, if I didn't do that and the mesh got away from this port, it could just pull the bag together there and we wouldn't get vacuum throughout this piece. So we want vacuum all the way through. And again, keep it out of the seal on the bag, and I'll get it sealed up. Okay, now I am ready to begin to apply vacuum to this. And I'm going to apply that slowly. I'm not going to turn it clear up so that I pull full vacuum all at once. We want it to slowly pull down and just pull the bag in completely around the bowl. Now when this process begins, as it pulls the bag down inside, some of the resin is going to migrate out, and some of it will find its way through the hose, and you'll be able to see it running in through the hose there. And here it comes now. We're starting to get a little bit there already. And now it's just slowly pulling this down, and this is just like doing pieces in the larger pot when we did it before. It's going to pull this in, and then we'll get air coming out of the bowl, out of the wood, into the resin, and we'll be able to watch that. And we'll just, once we get things started to pull in here pretty good, then we can just keep increasing our vacuum slowly. We just want to let it come up slow so that we don't just pull all the resin through. We want to have it be able to find its way all around the bowl, both inside and out. And if I lift this out of here now, you'll see that the bowl has now conformed to the bottom side. The bag has to the bottom side of the bowl, and there's resin all around there as well. Okay, things are looking good. We can increase the vacuum a little more. All I'm watching for is that the resin's staying around there and that we have good suction all around through this. And once again, any resin that gets pulled into here, when we're finished, we can simply pour that back in and save it. It's completely reusable. All we want to do is have plenty in there for the bowl to be fully saturated. Okay, we're going to go to full vac now. We're almost there. Now, we have vacuum, and in these little folds and creases, I can see the air bubbles coming up that are escaping from the bowl. And so I'm going to watch those, probably, 40, 45 minutes for this to really completely evacuate the air from the bowl. That varies a great deal depending on the type of wood and how large the bowl is and all those other variables. But you want to make sure that you've given it plenty of time. And that's what we'll do now. We'll simply let all of that go. And once we've had our good time, a long enough time, and we've got good penetration, and we see no more air bubbles, we'll know that we're complete. Okay, I've got my gloves back on. We've pulled this down now. The resin is into the bowl, so we'll turn our vacuum off. And now, once we've got the vacuum out, I can open this up, and I've got the gloves on because now we've got resin in there. And now this bowl is going to be treated exactly like the wood that we did earlier. You take it out, and then we wrap it in foil, just as you would the smaller pieces. And this would go into foil now. Just wrap it so that, again, that resin can't run all over the inside of the oven. And then this will go in the oven. Now, because this is a little bit thicker, there's a lot of wood here. It may take a little bit longer than just the smaller pieces of wood. But it's, again, you can open it, check it. If it's still, damp and not crystallized, you know that it needs more time. Close it right back up, keep it in the oven. A bowl of this size is more like an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, or maybe longer, than where the smaller pieces, usually 45 minutes to an hour, will do those. So that's the process of doing bowls. Very much like the smaller pieces, except we're using this bag, again, which allows us to do these larger pieces, these unusual shaped pieces that wouldn't necessarily fit in the other container. Okay, just a couple of other things here. With this, you also get this small pot. And the small pot can be really handy for doing just a few pieces. If you've got some real special pieces and you just want to do a couple of them, you can use it. And what's unique about it is you can place the pieces in, and then we have a small anti-float plate that fits in that one as well. So this all comes with the kit. So you're going to get, everything you need, including this. So you can use it, but here's what's different. To do this one, we would put the resin in here. It doesn't take as much volume. And then this simply stands inside the large container. And we use this lid, and now we pull a vacuum on the whole thing, and you just watch the process there. So this allows you to do small batches using the large container with a smaller container inside. So that's a huge advantage. And another thing then, with these resins, we can add color. And this color is specially formulated to mix with the resin so that you get color throughout the piece. And as you can see with some of these, with the brighter colors, it really can make the pieces very, very interesting. And so color can be added, but once you've added color to the resin, that resin has to just be used with that color from then on. It's going to be colored until you use it up. So you really can't filter it out or anything like that. So again, that's why this small container can be really nice for smaller batches where you want to do some special coloring for pieces. This just has great potential to do some really interesting stuff. You know, being able to color. The color can even also be done with bowls if you choose to do a large batch. So there are lots and lots of opportunities here. Adding the color, being able to stabilize smaller pieces, large pieces. We have systems that can pretty much do anything you want to do with wood stabilization.